Yes.
That just in case.
Okay.
But I was certainly not going to be late.
No, she was here on time. She was here on time. She was not late.
I heard
she has never been late.
If she's able to, certainly not. I mean, I would not.
She has never been late. Actually, you've never ever gone back on an agreement we've had before.
I've tried very hard to walk the straight and narrow. Yes. But, like I said, the boss, James Ajani Boating, actually named and shamed us a few days ago. I mean, I was very certain that I was making quite an effort. But it appears my
efforts were not enough.
My very best efforts were probably not enough. So I am here on a mission of redemption.
It's nice to see you this morning.
Pleasure. Nice to see you too, and to hear all of you.
Yeah.
And to say a very, very, very good morning to everybody out there. Yes.
Well, I guess there's no better place to start than from where we are picking from. You just heard the listeners talking about this matter of the coup in Niger and the moves being made for a possible military intervention, the issues being raised by the minority about what should happen before anything of sort is Ghana contributes troops to any military intervention. And I think it was yesterday, and a lot of papers are reporting it this morning. The former president actually posted on his Facebook page, "Constitutional governance is still best. It allows us to peacefully change our leaders if we believe they are not working in the interest of the people. 483 days to go for the verdict of the people." I'm wondering what he was trying to communicate. Was this about Ghana, or was he also worried about what the impact of the sub-region might have on Ghana?
But, Senna, thank you very, very much. And I'm sure that I listened to one of the very last speakers on the show, and I believe that he actually expressed sentiments that actually resonate with the words of former President John Dramani Mahama. Indeed, his position was very, very simple, that we should choose peace over war. I believe he also mentioned the fact that diplomacy had taken a new turn over the last few years, where there are softer approaches, more jaw-jawing, more negotiations, more dispute resolution measures, more arbitration, where you open channels for better communication in terms of diplomacy, rather than the extremities of times past, where you could only apply force to either stop people or, to bring in measures that forcibly remove, governments, etc. Clearly, I think for most of the leaders in the sub-region and across the world, there's really no appetite presently for the use of force or the application of same in international law, international relations. But be that as it may, Africa has actually, in the last few years, experienced about 6 coups d'etats. Does this speak to a re-insurgence? Are the coups of the past becoming a characteristic of modern-day Africa? Are we struggling, to underscore the underpinnings of what we call democracy? All sorts of things come to play, coupled with the fact that there are also some other Africans that are even struggling to survive even under this level of democracy. I've listened and read many books, many schools of thought, some that actually posit, for example, that maybe this type of democracy is not for Africa. Maybe we need to reinvent a democracy that suits the African or applies to the African, or maybe we need to rethink. I even heard the Speaker of Parliament actually say that we should now allow for traditional rulers to come into politics so that we can benefit from their wisdom. So you can tell that suddenly there's a lot of questions going on, a whole litany of debates that are ongoing currently. But in the midst of it all, there's still this ugly head of coups that are still, ravaging, appearing, and literally continuing to intervene and remove democratically elected governments in and around Africa in particular? Should we start to worry? Is there a need for us to begin to rethink the nature of our democracy? So yes, like President John Dramani Mahama, we all agree that democracy really is our very best bet. But what are the reasons why democracy is currently under attack, more or less?
In fact, one of the reasons that have been assigned has to do with the fact that there are democratic leaders who are becoming much more entrenched, difficult to hold accountable, and in some cases, they decide when they want to leave office. People are adding up terms that were not in the constitution when they took over power. That the only reaction, perhaps, because they have put in place systems that make it difficult to even take them out to the same democratic process that brought them in. People are happy whenever there is a coup, at least. It takes him out for in the short term. How do we change that narrative and get people to at least respect the constitutions and be accountable to the people?
Senna, the question I think we should be asking is, how has democracy benefited those who elect these democratically elected leaders? Has democracy resolved the raft of challenges to do with our socio-cultural issues, with our economic woes, with our hardships, our poverty, our education? How has democracy benefited the wider populace of Africa? Has democracy delivered on a welfare state for the Africans who do not have? Has it delivered for the many persons rendered poor, for our many rural communities? Has it delivered on medications that are needed, on water, on electricity? For example, in Niger, I was surprised to read that 80% of the population live in darkness. So you have to walk maybe to the smaller parts where 20% have electricity just to see light. How is that possible in 2023, for example? If you are in the United States of America and the lights go out, you know there's a major disaster. There's a hurricane, there's a heavy downpour, there's a fire outbreak. Something must cause the power to go out. So in those communities and jurisdictions, things such as power distribution are taken for granted. What can you take for granted in Africa? Short of the democratically elected leader who will do all that is in his power to win power. And there's an interesting book I read a few weeks ago, and it says that all the leaders who come into power because they have said all the things that you and I want to hear, they have said all the right things, spoken with passion and emotion, by the time they leave office, either at the end of the first term or the second term, they are usually the most hated. So how has democracy delivered on the promise that all of us as Africans want to see? How has it delivered on what the citizens want to see? Has it delivered, for example, in Ghana, inflation is now at an all-time high, 43%. How has democracy reduced inflation? Food costs is at an all-time high here in Ghana. How has democracy reduced the cost of food? People want basic amenities, cheaper housing. How has democracy delivered on housing? Unemployment is at an all-time high, and today for the first time I saw yet another headline on the graphic front page that the Ministry for Youth and the Youth and Employment Agency was going to be putting 100 million Ghana cedis into youth enterprises. Interest rates are above 40%. If you add the service charges and all the other charges associated with borrowing, you could easily be paying about 42% as interest. What business can survive even in its first year of registration when you are bogged down with interest rates of 40% and above, and inflation is at 43 to 44%. Your central bank is reporting phenomenal, humongous losses of about 60 billion in one accounting year alone. Who can? And in fact, when you start that business, who are the beneficiaries of that business? Is it the Senayas who are producing shoes? How many people are buying new shoes? Is it the caveman people who are producing wristwatches? When you have a central bank that is buying what? Upmarket wristwatches for members who are leaving the employment. How has democracy delivered on what our priorities are? How has constitutional rule satisfied the people who chose the path of democracy? In the military, in the police, in all the security services and agencies across Africa, how has democracy delivered on the promise of a better future, on the promise of equity, fairness, justice, name it, even for respect for the citizens who elect you into office? How has democracy delivered that promise, that hope of a better future? So naturally, for as long as democracy fails to deliver on the promise of hope for its own people, then naturally you will have challenges. Look, a few weeks ago I was having a conversation with someone who has very communist thoughts and trying to explain to me why countries like that thrive. The arguments were simple. The trains work. The roads are more trouble. Bread is produced for everybody at the same cost. They have social interventions as housing. They even export medical facilities and doctors to countries such as ours. There's a level playing field where nobody goes below except for a few. So even if for nothing, at least there's a certain semblance of equity, of fairness for the have-nots. How has democracy in Africa satisfied this key concept of humanity, which is equity, fairness? You have communities today that do not have water even to drink. Many communities, even in our urban communities, right here in Accra, potable water is a challenge. Listen to conversations on Twitter Spaces, for example. Listen to the challenges of young people who are 30, 35, and 40 and have never had a decent job. In my mother's day, people used to argue about taking voluntary retirement. When you are above 45, above 55, that's before you attain the age of 60. Today, you and I cannot take that for granted. So when you tell us that we should take these loans at huge interest rates and go out there and set up a business, how are you going to survive with interest rates of 40% and above? How many more millions is government going to give to people who they know will not thrive under the current investment climate that we live in?
But then you must be worried as a politician, because ultimately, everything you said about the democracy we have currently, it will all come back to the person to whom we hand power. That perhaps, if the democracy is failing, then you are not delivering.
Asana, in the whole 10 minutes, that is not in doubt. Our elected leaders delivering even on their basic promises. And how have they delivered? When we have measured, for example, and criticized their inability or criticized the outcomes which are probably inadequate, how have they responded?
So to responsiveness is important.
Even reaction is important. priorities are a major challenge. Look across the whole socio-cultural table, on the economy, on education, on social interventions, on infrastructure across the country. How have our democratic leaders, for whom we queued in the sun, people sacrificed enormously? In 2020, 9 lives were lost that will never be recovered. Their blood is what marred that last election. Those people who were elected in that particular election, how have they delivered on the democracy that propelled them to office?
Then perhaps let me then ask you, you're a lawyer yourself. You spent a significant portion of your time in politics, in office. What then do you think about the suggestion that at this point our president seems to be very quiet on what his real intentions are when it comes to Niger? His defense minister is speaking. Parliament is not in the know. Should the representatives of the people be the first point of call before any decision is made if it comes to military intervention in Niger?
Why not? You see, Parliament is actually a microcosm of the entire populace of our country. Don't forget that in times past, remember when the poll tax was introduced in the United Kingdom, for example, it was a very unpopular tax at the time. People marched against it. When VAT was first introduced in Ghana, if you remember, there were huge demonstrations against its introduction and implementation. The people still have a voice, irrespective. And so when the people say that Parliament is a microcosm of our representation, and so decisions affecting the country ought to be discussed at the level of Parliament. The framers of the Constitution had very good reasons, do you understand? That certain decisions that commit the country in one way or the other, especially in peacetime, to war, conflict, that it requires the buy-in of the citizens. So where you are a democratically elected government or administration or leader, it is imperative, it behoves on you. You have a constitutional responsibility. Why the president could even address the nation, speak directly to the good people of Ghana. He could organize a media encounter, find a way to explain the reasons for or otherwise. But you see, what is it that we see? This particular administration led by Nana Akufo-Addo expects Parliament to be a rubber stamp of its authority. Wants to pick and choose what they take to Parliament and what they don't. That is really where the challenge is. But you see, there is very little or no appetite for war. Not because we do not have to ensure that we respect democratically elected governments, but largely also because there are just so many inequalities. Why, when you look at what happened in Nigeria, were you not sad that normal citizens on the streets were out there jubilating? But you see, I have another rendition. For how long will they appreciate what the coup makers would be offering them? The minute they wear civilian clothes, somehow the whole trajectory changes, and then it becomes pretty much the norm. It is for this reason that I think that advocacy, education, negotiations, arbitrations, more than war, really, or enforcement, should be the way to go. Talk to the coup makers, negotiate them out of the coup, but that club of old leaders must advise one another. Let's tackle the root cause of the emergence of coups once more in the sub-region, on the African continent, and the fact that they continue to enjoy some support from the very citizens who have chosen the path of constitutional rule. How has Ghana's democratically elected leader Nana Akufo-Addo applied the rule of law? How has he worked in terms of respect for the constitution or constitutional rule? Have you ever at any time in Ghana heard more calls for a full overhaul of the 1992 constitution? In many ways, it is more the individual implementing the tenets of the constitution than that there's something wrong with the constitution. Do we want a constitutional review or amendment just for the sake of it? Yes, some portions may be a bit antiquated and certainly would require a little bit of tweaking. But should we then throw away the whole document just because one man who in times past was actually touted as a conduit for the rule of law?
I'll come back to that point because that's an important issue that you're raising. But clearly, you are for dialogue.
Always.
Just talk.
Always.
Sit down with them and have a conversation.
Especially in Africa, considering our challenges. There are a few failed states also around in the sub-region. Mm-hmm. There are very, very serious border control issues. There is a proliferation of arms and ammunition in illegal hands. There is a bustling trade, for example, in illegal arms across Africa. There are some insurgencies across the continent. There are some conflicts that do not seem to even have an end in sight. Do we want to go and create further conflicts, additional conflicts? That is what we... And the cost of saying, at huge cost, on economies that actually, literally, have nothing left. Take Ghana, for example. The country is flat out broke, bankrupt, insolvent. I'm sure you saw the headline of Graphic today. Treasury bills are what? Inching upwards. Government's negotiations and dialogue regarding the debt exchange program threatened and undermined. Inflation is still high, and of course now we know that our central bank alone, printed over 90 billion. In all cities, that is what? Trillions of cedis. So, how are we going to resolve all of these challenges? So the question really is, how has democracy benefited the many displaced people? Remember that even now, largely, the reason why democracy is suddenly facing this existential threat is because we have not adhered to the rules and tenets of our democracy. In our justice delivery, in equity in terms of distribution of what we have, in poverty alleviation. Even HIV is on the increase because we have not committed adequate resources to advocacy and to education. Poverty is on the ascendancy because we have not committed adequately. Only a class of a few in a club of democratically elected leaders even have anything called money. In fact, some of those leaders are richer than the countries whose economies they run, administer and supervise. The ethics of it, the morality of it, these are the things that are undermining our nascent democracy.
Well, if you just join us, 9:06, and I have in studio Mrs. Joyce Bawa Mogtari. You brought up the issue of the constitutional review. After everything you've said, including the refusal of even elected leaders to be accountable, where they even put in place systems that ensure that they do not account, doesn't it then make sense for the average Ghanaian? I know you said it's the person in power that perhaps has given rise to these concerns. But if you realize that your constitution is so porous and can be exploited to this extent, does that not give rise to those who are saying, then this constitution needs to be overhauled completely?
You see, why do you think that it's only in Africa there are these very heavy conversations in and around constitutional documents or instruments? When you go to other jurisdictions, constitutions are being implemented seamlessly because people believe that the society is fair, the society is just, that there's equity, even if not entirely, but partly, people feel it. Why is it different this side of the world? The reason is simple. Mind you, there are even some jurisdictions where there really are no constitutions. But the countries run, and run fairly. They run equitably. You see, the rules of human justice literally run across everything. In our religion, in our faith. Look, even for atheists, at the bottom of it all is what? Humanity and fairness. The Rastafarians, they believe in equity, in justice and fairness. The Christians, same. The Muslims, same. So remember that underpinning most constitutional documents really are rules of largely what? Fairness and justice. So once you start to undermine, chip away from these things, naturally you will have issues. And when you look even in our current dispensation, for example, in Ghana, take, for example, what the whole conversation is about, the constitutional review process. Specific portions only. And all those portions, if you look very closely, are the ones to do with what? Fairness, equity, justice, what is right, what is wrong. People just want more what? Equality. So, for example, where people receive additional emoluments, where people receive end-of-service benefits, where people believe that these benefits are unfair in a country that has many other challenges that need attention, these are things we do not require. When people wake up in the morning and read stories that the Minister of State in their possession, it is not about the law or the legality or otherwise of it, you understand? It is the ethics of it, it is the morality of it. Where, Senna, for example, you have 48 million Ghana cedis sitting in an account. And there are many people who cannot even afford one meal. Take the law aside. Look at fairness, look at equity, look at the imbalances in our society. Why do we have ministers of state, for example? It is born out of what? The constitutional instrument. It is born out of what? The democracy. Why do we have members of parliament, for example? As a result of what? Democracy. But why do we have so many members of parliament? It is also as a result of what? Democracy. So the constitution says that whenever the population gets to this point, go and create additional, districts, create additional what? Constituencies, create additional what? Electoral zones, create additional what? Regions. Do we only focus on the constitutional provisions that engender pocket issues or benefit issues as against feeding the populace, the voters who queue to elect us into office? Can you go around, look at the district assemblies. You heard about the spat in the common fund administration and dissemination of funds to the district assemblies. A letter was written even by the local government minister to the president. We haven't heard the president comment on that letter. But you've seen also the huge sums of money is currently being expended on a campaign to be elected once more in the name of democracy. How has the Constitution been utilized to benefit the market women, the market men, the framers of the 1992 Constitution, for example, here in Ghana?
So is the utilization for you, not the Constitution itself?
What has the Constitution done? Have you read the preamble? It's very straightforward. Very, very straightforward. It's for the people and by the people. So if you become a democratically elected leader, for example, and you think that you can do whatever you like, say whatever you like, take whatever decisions you like, speak anyhow, after all the promises that actually ensured that the people elected you into office, you display this cavalier attitude, certain I don't careism, a certain dislike for dissenting views and opinions. Look, there's only one thing that I say to people all the time, that the life of a politician, for example, working for President Mahama, is that I've roamed the length and breadth of this beautiful country of ours. Sena, when you read the statistics about levels of poverty in print, wait until you see it for real. Go to some of our rural communities. Go to some of these mining communities that you hear so much about and read so much about. Just visit some of these areas. And you see, these days, the work of the opposition is very well cut out for them, because we have support from across the country. Speak to ordinary Ghanaians from all walks of life. The issues they speak about are the same. Then, even some of our avowed critics, maybe they might not say that, oh, the NDC probably is better, or John Mahama led this country better because it is not in their, interest so to do. But read the headlines. Some of the biggest critics of the NDC. So, President Mahama is right. Better to safeguard our constitutional dispensations, because you see, the whole world and research supports this notion that democracy is still our very best bet. It allows the ordinary person, the ordinary individual, to have a say. It allows for freedom of expression. It allows for freedom of association. It is also the reason why we have what? A multi-party system of politics. So there are also large political parties, there are smaller political parties, there are independent politicians. There's also people. There is even some who proclaim their neutrality. But in all of it, it is still the very best, because it allows for that, a certain participation by the people. But you see, sometimes it is also the patience to sit out that period of the democratically elected leaders' time in office. In Ghana, for example, we have a 4-year term, and I remember how we all were up in arms when President Akufo, in his own wisdom at the time, asked that the term should be extended to 5 years, because in 5 years he was very sure that there's something that you could do and achieve fully, but that the 4-year term was so short, because by the time you are sworn into office, the next thing you know, you are in the 100-day period already, and people are demanding that you ought to have started A, B, or C. But you see, what you can do in 100 days, why can't you do same in 4 years? So there's a school of thought that agrees that this is the best in terms of time and terms in office, even for members of parliament and all other categories of elected officers. In some countries, they have the 5-year term. I've even heard Nigeria, for example, that is actually trying to introduce a 7-year single term. I've heard all sorts of arguments. And of course, in the course of the constitutional review process, all these conversations came up. Even at the time, when you read some of the history to the framing of this particular constitution, you will realize that there were all these conversations about term lines in office. But in all of it, the question all of us should ask when we go out there at the end of the 4th year and elect new leaders, how have they lived up to the expectations, our aspirations, etc.? So when, for example, Nana Addo knows, for example, that, Ghanaians are not happy that he want to take a military contingent, to enforce democracy in Niger, for example, should he not take a minute to consult further? Should he not pause over it? Should he not ponder over it? Or when you start the construction of a cathedral and there's a huge uproar that in terms of priorities, this is not a priority at this time. But the question you should even ask yourself carefully, is this really a promise to satisfy God? Or is it because you sense that there's a huge Christian population that probably will be convinced that this is a good and well-intentioned project? Are we saying that however we get resources, for example, to commit to the service of God, that those resources should not be questioned, that no due diligence should be done, that we can commit as much as $58 million without recourse to any sense of accountability or transparency? And then you hear the president in that recording almost as if he's touting the same people, taunting them more than touting, literally. So you wonder, is this really the leader that will help us deliver on the Ghana that we all want? Or is just a leader who chooses to do what pleases him at any given time? Sana, if you look at all our socio-economic indices, on which of them have we performed? Which of them have we improved? Even on the intangible, Ghana is no longer a happy society. Trivial as that may sound, but these are all things that are measured in indices. There are peer review mechanisms for which these things are done. What happened to the happy-go-lucky Ghanaian? What happened to the risk-taking Ghanaian? Everything has changed. On poverty, we are declining. Look, if you look at the sums that we are being told have been expended by the central bank alone, and I'm sure that Dr. Addison ought to know that never in the history of this country has any governor brought the name of that bank into such opprobrium, generated so much discussion and criticism, perceived or otherwise, real or otherwise. In even declaring that loss alone lies his incompetence to lead that institution. The central bank has responsibilities to the good people of Ghana, to the citizens of Ghana. And I've heard them say flippantly, you don't expect the central bank to come day in, day out to ask for. But if the central bank has, quote unquote, a board of directors receiving such huge fees unapologetically under the current economic circumstances in a country where families struggle for one meal, then imagine what $8,000 looks like to you and I in cities. What it can buy. Look at rent. But you see, we have a government that currently literally operates on what? Deception. And as my friend said, JB, nyami beye. Because even God is not mocked. And God can see in his own wisdom that our government is not here for us. I mean, think about it. Sena, if you found even $20,000, for example, in my room, even as I'm sitting here in opposition, and this was widely announced, there'll be complete mayhem. All hell will break loose. Every headline will scream. So you see, sometimes we belabor the law because remember that the laws are actually what? They are passed by humans. Look at the ethics, the morality more than anything. You know, I think that sometimes when we dwell too much on legislation, on the law, we forget the basic humanity that underpins the passage of all of these laws and legislations. Look at the cost of living. Look, when you open my phone, you will see messages, very sad. Young people struggling to find rent, suitable accommodation, decent accommodation. The young lawyers at the firm, each time I watch them leave law school, doing pupillage and starting out, you start to wonder how they cope. And if you share one bed with your mother, for example, when you graduate, at least you want to get a decent private place for yourself, even to show that, oh, I'm now a graduate, I've left school, and I want something better. The same president tells us, Nana Addo said it very boldly, that it will be too expensive to complete Saglemi housing. But he can start a new project, as if that one was for free. You understand? There is no profit. The people will just complete, the private developer will finish, and then everybody can just go and pick one and then move into it. You understand? These sorts of things leave enormous room for worry. Where are our priorities? You go out there and you choose the path of democracy, you choose the path of constitutional rule. You want to safeguard the interests of your people. You want to protect the interests of your people. You want to provide adequate, sufficient. Look, some are not asking for $48 million. No! Or $5 million. No! They cannot afford Samuel Kujeto and Associates to defend them. No! We don't even know where those law firms are, where their offices are situated. They have no idea. Absolutely none whatsoever. They don't even know when you talk about, unexplained wealth agreements or unexplained wealth legislations and all. They have no idea. But Sana, they know one thing, that they are starving, that they are hungry, that they can't provide for their kids, that they can't even access basic health facilities. You go out there and promise Agenda 111. Your central bank announces 60 billion in losses, but they find 131 million for car maintenance. Central bank. They print illegally more money than the threshold.
From listening to you, everything you've heard about the central bank sounds unconscionable to you.
Everything about Nana Addo's administration is largely unconscionable. Most of the decisions they take, most of the things they're doing are largely unconscionable, because one thing is for sure, they don't serve the interest of the common man. They don't respect the tenets of our constitution.
Not even explanations from the central bank suffice for you.
Look at the most porous thing's explanation. So who actually counters who? Is it the pliant response or attempt to reply? What is it? Is it the subtle accusation or an attempt even to justify the unjustifiable?
Because they say the problem is not caused by us. There was a problem with fiscal management, which means that they were talking about the finance ministry, that they were spending more than they were generating. It created a problem. We had to step in.
The central bank is not a deposit-taking bank, is it?
Yeah.
So all their failings will do what? Will trickle down to all the other banks that literally depend on them. Where are the buffers that the central bank is supposed to provide for all of us? None. When we are preaching what? Debt exchanges, total destruction of that middle class that at least served as a certain buffer to all of us. Because you see, are you surprised by the example of a minister who keeps $590,000 in her bedroom, 300,000 euros in her bedroom, whose house helps are able to steal $1 million and more from her bedroom. That is the example of the democratically elected minister. What is the example that the central bank is giving to everybody else? That the financial sector is not stable, that is not reliable, that it is not secure, that the atmosphere for investment is not healthy enough.
That is what you read from what they are telling you.
They themselves, the examples that they set, the very bad and poor examples that they set. And then President Akufo-Addo writes a very beautiful love letter in reaction to her resignation. I say anywhere else, the media will be camped outside her doorstep 24/7, asking Madame Dapa how she came by all these resources. What is the name of the business? What is the profit level? What much tax has she paid? What is her corporate social responsibility to the society in which she lives? How has she contributed with all these huge sums of money to the poor out there? What has been her contribution to poverty alleviation as an individual, first and foremost, even before you come to all the other conversations? Look, let's look at soft things: morality, ethics, duty of care, responsibility, liabilities, genuine care for human beings, genuine love. Even the Bible tells you that it's only as you give that you receive. When you hoard all these huge sums of money saved in a bank account when everybody else is struggling, and young people have to borrow at 40% and above. Look at the level of corruption into which we have sunk. All parastatals, but of course, the head itself is rotten. So the body certainly will be just as bad.
But in her case, you're a lawyer yourself. The suggestion is that nothing has been proven yet. You have money. You have seen money.
Senna,
but you have not established any link to
as I said,
time in office.
I don't want to reduce the conversation to legalities or otherwise. She can afford very expensive lawyers. That is their job. She has a whole government attorney general and a legal advisor advising her. That is their business. My job this morning and my job as an individual is focusing on the poverty, on the lack of opportunity, of the failure of Nana Addo and Bawumia and Ken and all the troubles that those people now represent. That is really our problem, as a people. Our biggest problem is this group of people who are currently tenants of Jubilee House and the aficionados, negotiating all sorts of dubious agreements and contracts, fleecing the poor, overflogged state apparatus that is now currently flat out broke, breaking all the rules and taking no responsibility whatsoever. None. Are you not surprised to hear Ken Ofori-Atta tell us that the calls for his sacking were warranted? Was he speaking because the law says so? Was he speaking because there's a law that says that the president should not sack him? No. He is admitting to his own feelings as government's ombudsman that he has not in any way sufficiently, dutifully protected the public purse that his boss swore to protect, that he has dissipated it and totally destroyed that public purse. You've heard about how poorly the Momo tax is doing. Who has money even to send via mobile money? Who has money to save those huge sums that should be saved on the mobile money apps? Go around all those payment points that were set up. Have you seen how the number of kiosks have suddenly disappeared? The population is overly taxed and burdened by taxes. Investors are complaining. Look at the levels of bribery. But of course, that also fuels the high levels of corruption into which we have sunk. You know, I keep asking a question. When was the last time you heard Nana Addo speak about Ghana beyond AIDE? Speak about the Anas principle. But now Anas himself is finding himself on the wrong side of the law. You see, every human being has a level of self introspection that we all do. So if you, for example, were Madame Sisi Adapa, this amount of money was found in your custody, you'll be ashamed. You'll bow your head in shame. You'll probably be contrite. You understand? That is where there's a certain high moral turpitude, you understand, in our society. The condemnation will be loud. It will be so loud, you won't be able to come out. These PR gimmicks will never take that blot away. And for a woman of a standing in our society, I think it is unfortunate, it is regrettable. I've heard many legal experts speak to the matter, that we currently do not have a legislation on unexplained wealth, that there is really no law about whether or not a human being can keep what amounts of money in your home or otherwise and what the quantum should be. But we have a president and vice president, Bawumia, who told us that all of Ghana, every citizen will have a bank account. As soon as they won, they took 25 billion cedis to destroy how many banks, destroy how many families. Do you know number of people who got, you know, banks have a lot of people who are, a lot of intermarriages, couples, whose joint efforts could give them a good mortgage to acquire decent accommodation for themselves, a decent education. Do you know the number of marriages that have been undermined by that bank exercise? Many of them. Go around the country. Look at the banks that were owned by GN Bank across the country. You should look at the model, even of the buildings. You can tell that this was a very well thought out program, largely targeting poor, rural, largely unbanked communities. You see, look, it is very obvious that there's a certain orchestration, right? It is not just in how the permutations are. Going to rename the University of Ghana, that is just form, not the substance. You understand? Trying to rewrite the history of Ghana for no apparent reason. Most of the history books that we've read over the years, the facts remain unchallenged. Absolutely not. There are copyright rules, there are patent rules. There's every way in which facts that are not factual can be challenged, intellectual property laws, name it. Why is it that it's just when we have a certain individual as president that suddenly you hear a certain attempt to distort our otherwise beautiful history? Over 60 years of independence and counting. Why? We didn't know our history at the time. All the historians, even some of them key activists of the New Patriotic Party, like the late Professor Dubois and others, they didn't understand the history of Ghana. It would take President Akufo-Addo, a pseudo, half-baked economist / lawyer, to come and tell us what our history really is. But what is even the essence of that? How will that put food on your table? How will that improve your circumstances? How will that alleviate the poverty, the hardship? How is that going to even change the course of your life? Sana, look, even these days, the cost of justice is very, very high. And a few days ago, I saw a news item where our new Chief Justice said that people should stop paying bribes to court clerks and persons who work in and around courts and all of that. Why do you think that call is necessary at this time? Check the Corruption Perception Index, cost of doing business, cost of getting and securing justice in our country. All these things feed into the Corruption Index. they feed into poverty. So if you're a poor person, for example, and someone annexes your land, you can't seek redress. Certainly not through legal means. That's why all the land guards came up. Because the poor man cannot afford legal representation. But of course, when you are Madam Sisi Adapa, you have all this money at your disposal, all this power at your disposal. Naturally. We cannot even criticize the fact that she possesses all this money. It is not the legality of it. This is not the law.
In fact, there are those
It's almost like we take the Bible, for example. Why? The Bible imposes certain responsibilities on all of us as Christians. So does the Quran. When you confess your sins, you are the one who knows what your sins are. They may be in your heart and in your mind. You understand? But it is your personal responsibility to confess those sins. And whether I know about your sins or not, if you are a man of conscience, with your wits about you, certainly you will be ashamed when you fall short. You will seek redress. You atone for your sins. So that is a rule of thumb. We all have personal laws that guide us beyond the Constitution, beyond what is law, beyond what Parliament says, beyond what legislators say. Name it.
There's also the politics of it, where people are making comparisons with what happened in the case of your colleague. I think you started in the same government, then she had to be fired because of a tape.
Look.
Yes.
And I give a shout out to Victoria Hammer. Fantastic young woman, contributing her quota at Ghana's foremost university, the University of Ghana. I think a few days ago, I heard someone too, was it John DeMello or something, saying that he was hoping to make $1 million from agric and not from politics. So I'm not sure. Maybe it's because of all these findings in the boudoirs and cabinets and cupboards of state key actors and operators. You understand? Suddenly it appears as if everybody's talking about, something to do with the dollar or whatever. How come we don't even think in cities, really? Sometimes I wonder. Poor Victoria Hammer. Poor her. But remember, even some of the biggest and deepest criticisms came from within. The NDC has a way that we have a certain moral standard of what should and should not be. And sometimes we judge ourselves even more critically than those who are outside. But oh my goodness, just imagine that in a morning like this, Nanado even received a tape along the lines of Victoria Hammer's dreams. It will be a fantastic escape route. Because I'm sure right now, anything but a conversation about Madame Sisi Adapa and her millions, whether ill-gotten or otherwise, that's not the point.
You're saying that if the Victoria Hammer incident had happened under Nanado,
why?
Nothing would have been done about it?
That is just in your mind. Why would anything be done about it? Somebody has all these millions, billions, in fact, in her possession, in her custody. They didn't say it was entrusted to her by anybody. They haven't said that she has this huge conglomerate and this is the profit from there. So far, have you seen any headlines speaking about any business interests that we know about? Then people come and say that under the law, no crime has been committed. Under the law, no this, no that. Should one human being even have $5 million lying in their account when government cannot even afford to pay pensioners for their investments? How about all the other categories of investors that we have? Have you seen the latest reactions from the investor community in Ghana? Even our own local investors who have huge businesses, a lot of them are moving to other jurisdictions. There's a whole new culture about doing business here. Kickbacks, huge bribes, negotiating huge amorphous agreements that make no sense, funny judgment debts, scandalizing amounts of money is being mentioned. And this is all under a democratic dispensation. How has democracy benefited the poor Ghanaian on the streets? The poor Ghanaian child, the malnourished Ghanaian child, the hungry Ghanaian child, the tired, hard-up market woman or man, the many big businesses bogged down by taxes and kickbacks. And then government refuses to prioritize even under all of these circumstances. And woe betides you if you dare to criticize. Now, our president is as if he's laughing at us. You listen to his tone when he's speaking.
As if he's mocking us.
Yeah, you can tell. I won't use the word. Mocking is a very nice word.
He's laughing at us.
He's literally laughing at us. Hey. Like matric you.
Well, we have Mrs. Joyce Bawa Mogtari in studio. I have to take a break. We will come back. There is more. In fact, she keeps asking the question how democracy benefited us, but she restates that her faith in democracy has it been shaken a little?
Oh, on that one I agree entirely with all the schools of thought, and of course with President Mahama's position. Mm-hmm. Democracy is still our best bet. There is no doubt. Mm-hmm. But democracy also means equity. It means fairness. Mm-hmm. It means justice for the people, by the people, with the people's interests at heart, and to do for the people what is right by them. What democracy is not is to amass huge sums of money, irrespective of whether any law has been breached or not, whilst others sleep hungry and on an empty stomach. That is what democracy is not.
And I'll spend the next 9 minutes. I know you still have a lot to say on this matter, but I also wanted to find out from you how you think the Bank of Ghana matter. How should this be handled going forward? There are those who are calling for the resignation of the governor of the Bank of Ghana. What do you think?
So now when I leave here, I want you to conduct a very short experiment. Cross-check on the United Kingdom, for example. Okay. When the governor, the equivalent of the Bank of England, resigned a few years ago. Find out why. You understand? I know that the minority in parliament has done a yeoman's job, demanding accountability, demanding transparency. They have used any means available. They have been disrespected. They have been berated, treated with utter disrespect and disdain on all levels. And I'm sure you heard at one point even the speaker had occasion even to take on the finance minister for his inability to appear before parliament to answer questions within the time frame required. The impunity even with which they deal with members across the political divide is within itself telling. Okay? Anywhere else in this world, well, except for our Accra, Ghana here people, and of course, where Nanado and his boys and girls are concerned, Dr. Addison will be history. Why? What is your responsibility as a central bank governor? And then what does he come back and say? Just like Madame Sledapa, they have not breached any law. How do we know? Who has investigated what has or hasn't been done? Who has carried out any forensic investigation? Who has visited the Bank of Ghana, for example, to cross-check on the announcement that they lost 60 billion in 1 year? How that happened? Where the money went to? Who has even gone to cross-check that the monies that they were printing illegally were and above the threshold, that all those monies indeed were applied legally? Look, their appetite for borrowing continues to be completely at variance with everything that the directive principle of state policy demand of people in government. Senna, do you know that now it is almost as if we are borrowing every week just to survive? So we have a finance minister whose only claim to fame is that he goes around borrowing resources to fund what? Lifestyle. To fund what? Things that are not a priority. To fund what? Hand to mouth. of state actors, because you realize that, look, there's a report here that the government borrows around 2 billion cedis and every week to fund this activity. So
2 billion cedis
yes,
a week.
The appetite for borrowing continues unabated. Probably even bigger now than before, because now they have nothing to lose. It's a whole gamble, because now we know that they are totally incompetent, that they are just completely reckless, wasteful, that the ineptitude even transcends what we used to think. That the hopelessness with which they are running, they themselves have no hope. So the people who are steering the ship themselves are completely rudderless and hopeless. What about the people that are waiting to benefit from the impact of those policies? So, to be honest, I doubt that this anchor will hold, or how much longer it will hold for, or whether or not it will even benefit the society in any meaningful way. And that this economy probably will not, in the next few years even, turn anyway towards any positive, unless, of course, we vote out this hopeless administration. All of them. You know, in this case, we don't have to sit and nitpick. No. En masse and en bloc. Completely vote them out.
That's the only solution.
That's the only solution.
But at this point, at least we can demand some accountability.
Look, I would always single out the minority group in parliament for mention. Like I will our young, efficient social media guys and bloggers. But for the social media and for Radio Gold, TV XYZ, Radio XYZ, Power Station, and some of these friendly ones, a few of them, it took a very long time to break the jinx of the mammoth corruption being perpetuated by this administration. How many times did the minority have to sing, shout, scream to get results? But now you have the local government minister reporting another appointee to the president. Have you heard any of those people speak out against the morality or the ethics of a minister having in her possession over $1 million to even be stolen by workers in a domestic space? So we'll come to the how later. We'll come to the why later. We can spend years determining the legality or otherwise what laws have been breached and have not been breached. In any case, what law will you be upholding to keep all these huge sums of money in your room? In fact, if there are any Ghanaians who have those kinds of monies in their room, then that's what the state should be asking, that they be paid into bank accounts so they can use it to help the poor, to alleviate suffering, to invest in infrastructure, in health, to invest in road networks, improve transportation, so that the poor too can what? Breathe a little bit. That is all people ask for. That's all. Look, that is all the democracy is about. It's about the people and for the people. What is it you want to deliver through democracy? Freedom, liberties, change, reforms. Allow for wider participation and consultation. You know, share everything equitably. Everybody should have a little. You understand? At least a roof over your head is a human rights issue. Good water to drink is a human rights issue. Good motorable roads is a human rights issue. Safe and secure transportation. A safe and secure country. These are all things that you expect democracy to deliver for the people. Not for just the people who are stingy. Why? If the whole police service was just to provide security to the president or the vice president and the people who work in government, why would anybody be defending the constitution? Do you understand? Then we don't need. We should rather start to uphold the equity, fairness, and justice of our constitutions on this continent. Let's deliver equitably for our people. So if I have 50 million Ghana cedis, I should be able to tell you, Senna, on a Monday morning, that there's a school that has no tables and chairs. that there are children who are lying on the stomach somewhere, that there are kids who have not eaten because school feeding has been able to deliver good lunches, that there's no water in a certain community, that I hail from this community, I'm going there to help the member of parliament to provide better amenities for his constituency. I should be able to tell you that. Why? In many other countries, a lot of the rich people that we hear about and read about, they have foundations that have huge outreach programs across the world. There are some great leaders even in Africa, private business people, who have these foundations and are delivering interventions privately to augment what government does.
So the money should be brought out and spent on the people.
Happily. All of us here, think about it. Senna, how old are we? Just shut your eyes for a minute. That you are 60, you are 70, you are 80, and you have even $20 million. What is that money to you? A good name for you at that level would be 1,000,000 times worth more than all that money. And good health.
We have to bring this to a close. But before we do, does former President Mahama see the stories making the rounds about who should be his running mate?
Senna.
Has he seen them?
Everybody has seen them.
What has you are always mostly close to him.
Everybody has seen them.
What has he said about
and
it?
President Mahama, he misses nothing. He's probably more in the loop even than most of us.
Really?
Oh yes.
So he knows all these stories being reported.
There's nothing he doesn't read. There's very few things he doesn't hear. There's very little he doesn't see. And sometimes I say to him, he's still his very best advocate. He's seen it all. He knows it all. He understands. He appreciates. It's very normal. And you listen to some of the arguments for and against. People have all sorts of reasons. There's ambitions to think about. There's some people who think that this is the best opportunity. There's many people who have tried at one point or the other even to contest to become flag bearer of the National Democratic Congress. So naturally, once there's an opportunity, or that people even think that there's an opportunity, why not? You see, democracy is what has delivered on all of these things. Freedoms to associate, even freedom to ask for, freedom to lobby for, freedom to put yourself out there and say to people of Ghana, elect me as your leader so I can do this, I can do that, I can do this, I can do that. Naturally. And if there's one thing that Ghanaians can boast of, even beyond our politicians, is the human capital that we have. You understand?
Okay.
Fantastic individuals, great politicians, great academics, great leaders, statesmen and women of all kinds who can deliver all kinds of things under this democratic dispensation.
I do understand.
So the role of vice president, the nomination of vice president, even the very private, albeit interesting, contest to be vice president, whether sanctioned or otherwise, whether legal or otherwise.
There's a contest.
Of course, there's always a contest. But even to be flag bearer, there was a contest. Of course, there's always a contest. Even in our classrooms, in our homes, even as children, siblings. There are those contests that there are no rules for. There are no laws for. But there is always
a choice yet.
The time is not up. And in fact, the beauty about this particular position is that it is entirely under the remit, the purview of, the responsibility of the flag bearer at any given time to select from the gamut of options the very best option for running mates. And I believe in 2020, we had Professor Nana Jane. She was a fantastic addition. A very huge political party like the NDC went out there to select a female. as a running mate. So why not?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Senna. Very good morning to Uncle Ato, to James, Ajeni Boatin. James, I made it in on time. And I refuse your propaganda. And of course, greetings to all my friends in the Upper West region. I saw a message from Rhoda. Hi, hi, hi. And of course, my young people in Tamale, in the Savannah region.
Thank you.
And certainly our social media guys, Charlie. The Accra mayor, he's one of those very interesting guys, you know. Sometimes he reminds you of James, except he's light-skinned and I'm Perry. Well, he always looks excited and surprised.
Thank you.
Sabtia and all of those ones out there, Laurentia, you know, a whole bunch of them. And yes, to my sister Beatrice, you know, for taking a beating for all of us yesterday. But I think the best thing was that she acted like me at a tennis game once when someone actually deliberately and intentionally hit me so hard that I lost my balance, and I knew that it was intentional. And somehow, everybody somehow thought that I was overreacting. I think that yesterday, Beatrice displayed excellent sport.